Okay, welcome, City Council. We'll do a little roll call. Start with you down there, Kate.
Kate Bradshaw.
Chris Simonson.
Randy Lewis.
Millie Segura Bar.
Richard Hickinson.
Thank you. And this is the Bountiful City Council meeting, Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. This is a 6:30 work session, and at 7 o'clock we'll have the regular session. We appreciate all of you that are here with your matching shirts. Thank you. Yeah, wonder why you're here, huh? No, we're happy to have you here. We are. Thanks for attending. And we have Kendall here now as well, so make sure she's on our record. And with that, we're going to just turn time right over to you, Clint.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor.
For this discussion and item.
Thank you. We are grateful for your attention here this evening, that we can give you a little bit of an update on our victim advocate program and our prosecutor's office in general. We're grateful for the support that you have given for the program, and I'm not going to say a whole lot. I'm just going to turn the time over to our victim advocate, Ashley Stewart, and after that, I think you're going to hear from our prosecutor for a minute too, Yvette Donoso. So I'll turn the time over to them.
Thank you. Okay, so like he said, I'm Ashley Stewart. It's been a while since I've presented to you guys, so I recognize some of you, but not all of you. I have been the victim advocate here since May of 2018, and I have a social service worker license for the state of Utah, as well as I am currently accredited as a victim advocate through the National Organization for Victim Advocates. When I first started this position, the Victim Services Program was pretty new here to Bountiful, and it had only been going for a year. Not every city here in Utah has a victim advocate. More and more of them are getting them, either in their prosecutor's office or police departments or both. I am out of the prosecutor's office, so my main focus is working with the prosecution and with the court system and the victims that go through the court system. Let's see. So my position is completely funded by the Victims of Crime Act, which is through the Utah Office for Victims of Crime. The grant works on a 2-year cycle, and so I have had the honor of applying for the grant twice now. And both times it's been approved, luckily, which has been good. So originally, when I started, this position was just funded for 15 hours a week through the grant. It's now been upped to 24 hours a week, which I'm really grateful. It's allowed me to do a lot more services and a lot more work to try to keep up with our growing caseload. The grant is really great because it does pay me and I get to do a job that I really love. But it can be difficult. Anybody that's worked on a grant or applied for a grant, it is a lot of work. And luckily, lots of people in the city have been willing to help me with all of the requirements to apply for grants and make sure that that's all getting taken care of. It can also be difficult because it's based completely on federal monies. And so, like for the next 2 years, we did get approved from the grant, but it will be a decrease in funding. Just because of the monies that were available. Luckily, we have figured out a way to continue for me to stay at the hours I'm at and provide most of the services that I have been providing, even with the cuts that we'll see here in the next 2 years. So Bountiful has domestic violence, assaults, burglaries, DUIs, financial crimes, and protective order violations, just to name a few. All of these involve victims, and I help all of them. So anybody that's been listed as a victim in a criminal crime that's going to come through our court, I reach out to them and help them. I provide services to victims for misdemeanor crimes. Any felony crimes go through the Farmington court. So here in Bountiful, we just do misdemeanors. I help victims to navigate the legal system and provide support and updates throughout the whole court process. The legal system can be really confusing and overwhelming if you're not used to being in it very often. And that's just for people on a normal day. So if you take somebody that has had a traumatic experience or is in an emotional state, they get very confused with the legal system and trying to maneuver and work their way through the system. So that's why I'm there, to help them navigate that process. I explain everything, I answer a lot of questions, I act as a liaison between victims and the prosecutor. I keep victims updated on the status of their case, and I attend all the court hearings, sometimes with them or for them. Because of COVID-19, we have switched to a completely online court system. So I haven't been attending in person with them because it's all over WebEx, which is really similar to like a Zoom session. But I am there with them or on the phone with them during court hearings. I help victims to know their rights as they're going through the legal system, like the fact that all victims have the right to speak before a defendant is sentenced. I help them compose victim impact statements, which will be read or presented to the court before sentencing of those defendants. And I'm able to help them find their voice and feel heard by the court system. I also help victims with attaining pretrial protective orders, sentencing protective orders, civil protective orders, and civil stalking injunctions. Just to give you an idea, in the last year, I've explained the criminal justice process and provided notification of criminal justice events to victims 3,520 times. So this is helping to explain all the different court hearings, like what an arraignment is, a pretrial conference, an initial appearance, a preliminary hearing, jury trial, and help them understand what their role can be in all of those hearings and what they can expect to have happen at each of those hearings. I help victims receive restitution in cases, which means that I help them get money back for either loss of money or property that they've suffered because of the crimes. This past year, I've helped restitution 395 times. I help victims attain multiple types of protective orders and civil stalking injunctions, like I mentioned. So far this year, I've done 77 of those. I also help with safety planning, crisis intervention, and linking victims to resources throughout our community to help them get their needs met. I help mediate between victims, the prosecutor, the police department, and the court. In this past year, I've helped mediate 243 times, and overall, from September 1st to September 1st, I've helped 490 victims in Bountiful City. I work with victims to provide victim impact statements to the court. These are statements that allow the victim to let the court know how the crime has affected them and their family and kind of what they hope will be an outcome for the defendant. I had a case this year where, well, I've had lots of cases, but one of them, we had an individual, it was a stalking case, and this individual was being stalked often and even across other jurisdictions. This person was able to, I was able to communicate with them about the process, answer questions, link them to resources, and help them have the courage to do a victim impact statement. Because of the victim impact statement, the court sentenced the defendant to a harsher sentencing, as well as allowed the victim to feel empowered and like they had some control in a situation where the victim had suffered a loss of control and personal security. I primarily work with victims of domestic violence. In the past year, we've had 134 cases of domestic violence come through the prosecutor's office. The national statistics for domestic violence say that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced physical violence by an intimate partner. The intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crimes. Many victims of domestic violence do not leave the perpetrator on the first incident or the second. The average right now is about 7 incidents before they have the courage to leave and get out of the situation. I was able to work with one individual that had several incidents this past year where they would report, wish they hadn't reported, want to help with the prosecution, then want the case dismissed, and then feel bad that the defendant was going to be in trouble, and again want the case dismissed, which is all very normal behavior for somebody in a domestic violence relationship. However, this individual kept my number and my email handy and kept me updated every time there was a new incident or their mind changed from one way or the other. I was able to explain the domestic violence cycle and help the individual get the resources they needed, as well as understand what was going on with them. Eventually, this individual decided to help with prosecution in all the cases, was able to get a protective order and keep it in place, and then ended the relationship as well. The protective order has since been violated, and the victim has reported each violation. The defendant now faces multiple felony charges, and the victim is receiving therapy, working to repair the damage caused by the relationship, and moving on with their life. So in this position, I'm able to build relationships with victims and be someone that they can continue to have trust with and feel like they can come to regardless of how their feelings might change about a case. My hope is that the rapport I have with them will allow them to continue to use me as a resource regardless of what the case might be doing, and eventually we'll be able to get them and their family safe. So I'm excited to continue to work as the victim advocate for Bountiful City. I love it here. I love my job, and I love working in the prosecutor's office. So thank you. Do you have questions?
One question, then I'll let anyone else. So Safe Harbor,
Yes.
so in the county, what kind of relationship do you have, or and if you have one, what is it like?
Yes, so we do, I use Safe Harbor quite a bit. Most victim advocates are full-time in the other cities, and I am just part-time, which means my time to help with protective orders compared to some of the other cities is very limited. Like 98% of my time is spent on just trying to help with the court process with victims. Safe Harbor has advocates that are just for protective orders, and to fill out a protective order. When I've done it, it takes between 3 and 5 hours with the victim because it brings up a lot of emotional feelings for the victim. And so it takes a while to fill that paperwork out and to actually get it submitted and approved by a judge and all of that. So I refer a lot to Safe Harbor to help with protective orders when I just don't have time to do them. And they've been awesome to help all of our victims get the civil protective orders that they need. There's different types of protective orders, so I use them mostly for civil protective orders, as well as when we have victims that are wanting to leave a situation and they need shelter and they need it fast. We refer a lot to Safe Harbor for that too.
Thanks, Ashley. Any other questions?
I was really sorry to hear that there are that many. When you're talking about the numbers, and I think we'd all like to think that we don't have a problem, but clearly we need you. I'm so glad that you're there and that you can help these people. And it makes me think about before we had this position, it was just, we didn't have that support, right? And so
Yeah.
thank you for what you're doing.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Any others?
Anything else? Thank you, Ashley.
Great, thank
Could
you.
I say
Really
some-
appreciate it.
Mayor,
Thanks.
could I say something?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry to Ashley, I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Last night, I was coming out of work at 6 o'clock at my office on 500 South, and a man and a woman were walking up the street, and he was being verbally abusive to her in a very loud manner. It shocked me. It shocked me. And I thought, oh, it's a family thing. Maybe I should just not. And then I thought of this, and I've heard this, and I tell this to my kids: see something, say something. So I called the police.
Good.
And they sent an officer up, and I waited out in front to see, and within 5 minutes of my phone call, there was an officer there. She had the two individuals separated, and I don't know where it went from there, but the way he was treating her was not appropriate. And I think when we see something, we need to say something. And I think that's important to citizens. See something, say something in our city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks.
Now I'm going to let the prosecutor, Yvette Donoso, speak.
Okay, great.
Good evening. So this is the opportunity where I get to brag about Ashley because she's incredibly humble and she has not adequately represented how incredibly vital she is to the prosecutor's office. I think what Ms. Harris said, yes, we absolutely need Ashley and an advocacy program in our office. In fact, without an advocacy position in our office, it's my position that we would be violating the Victims' Right Act. As Ashley mentioned, under the Victims' Right Act, victims have the right to be informed about their case, to a speedy trial, to speak at sentencings, to receive information about how to obtain pretrial protective orders, sentencing protective orders, and that type of information. Of course, assistance also to ensure that jail release agreements are not violated and such. Ashley is an integral part in ensuring that all of that happens. In fact, she helps me prepare all of those documents in preparation for court. Something that she left out of her presentation is, as she didn't really explain to you what that court preparation process is. So in Bountiful City, every week, we probably handle 70 to 80 criminal cases every single week. That's not including the 20 to 30 traffic cases we do. She goes through and she calls every single victim case and speaks to the victim, keeps them appraised of the case, asks them if that victim wants a pretrial protective order, and all of that is prepared ahead of time. And she gives me a summary for court that we can have. And then during court, she texts me and says, don't forget, we need, $500 of restitution. We need a sentencing protective order with that case. She technically is almost like a second prosecutor with me on that case, whether we're in court, which has become vital because I don't know if you've heard, as she mentioned, we're now doing everything via Zoom, which has added about 15 to 20 hours a week for me to call people personally and to email offers to defense attorneys, which is something that we would do in person before, that now we have to do over the phone and via email. So having her around is absolutely vital to me. As far as just the numbers, yes, the numbers are absolutely sad to hear, especially given the fact that we think that Bountiful is our sweet little city where nothing happens. So just to give you an idea of the global numbers, and I pulled the department's, the Bountiful City Department's incident activity report for 2020. Once you subtract our just officer information cases, last year in 2020, Bountiful City police officers handled approximately 2,779 calls of actual crime calls, right? And this is where we're dealing with assaults, burglaries. We do a lot of controlled substance, DUI cases and such. But I'm just going to give you the numbers that really hit our advocacy program. Approximately 119 protective order violations, 63 approximately harassing communication calls, 154 DV assault cases. And then there's other cases, for example, such as thefts and such, which were about 471, where Ashley's also integral in calling those folks and ensuring that they get restitution. So she's the one that emails them, calls them, and ensures that I get receipts and I'm able to, as part of the plea bargain, get restitution for those folks. That's what she was talking about. If you add all of those up, that's about 807 cases a year where she's completely hands-on, or about 29% of the cases where there's actually crimes involving the police department. So that's a lot. That's why she's my right-hand girl, and I absolutely need her and value her. It's very important for any prosecutor's office to have an advocacy program to ensure not only that we get the work done, but also that there's a buffer, that victims feel that if they don't feel comfortable maybe talking to me because I'm a prosecutor, that they feel that they have someone that they do feel comfortable with, they can talk to about the case and who's advocating for them, right, as a victim advocate in the office. So I hope that gives you a little bit more light about the advocacy program in our prosecutor's office. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them at this time.
Any questions from the council?
Mayor, could I ask a question?
Please.
Yes.
What do you see as far as the increase? What is the increase? What is going on that's causing the increase in these domestic violence cases in Bountiful?
Well, I think COVID, we did see, we tried to compare the numbers actually between 2019 and 2020. And as far as the reports were concerned, we didn't necessarily see so much of an increase in numbers. We did see an increase in the gravity of the offenses. They are getting a lot more serious. So they are escalating in seriousness. The other thing that I should say that is important about our advocacy program is, as Ashley mentioned, sometimes the victims will help us prosecute the case. Sometimes they don't, and they actually get very upset with us and our officers. And sometimes our officers get hurt in the process. We've had victims turn on our officers and, spit on them, kick them out, file post complaints with them. And something that Ashley and I tried to do at that point is actually protect our officers and protect the city. At that point, we actually asked the victim to provide us something in writing saying that they want us to dismiss the case, or they don't want us to take action, so that if, for heaven forbid, something happens to that victim, we actually have something in writing saying that they did not want us to prosecute the case. And so it's a very delicate balance where we have to play. I think with COVID, part of the problem has been people are stressed. They're out of work. All the family members are at home. And like she said, for some of these victims, we have to be super respectful of their situation. It does take 5-6 times sometimes for them to be in that situation, for them to be willing to walk away. And we have to respect their journey in this situation. And we do. When they want us to help them get protective orders, we absolutely do. It is a little bit more different, and the law is changing. So, for example, now if there's children involved, the victim can waive the jail release agreement for that victim, but not for the children. And Ashley does a wonderful job at educating when they call and ask about waivers and such. And we do everything we can to educate them without giving them legal advice, of course.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
This was really informative. This was good. Clint, I thought maybe you'd have the last word here.
Just a final few thoughts. Thank you for the time. As you can see, we've got a great prosecution staff. We've got a great victim advocate program. When I first came here, I came from offices that had victim advocate programs, and I saw that we had a great prosecutor and a great prosecutor's office, but I saw how much there was lacking. And so I am personally grateful, and the city and the citizens of Bountiful are grateful for your support in this program. Ashley's amazing. She's great, and she's worth every penny we pay. And the amazing thing is we don't pay anything for her. That's truly the amazing thing. And we basically just offset all that, just to a reminder and for the public's information. We pay her salary, but then it is reimbursed to us 100%. All of our donations are in kind: office space, equipment, supervision, things like that are counted towards the grant. So we don't pay anything for all of those services that she provides. And then I just wanted to say, this last year has been hard for just about every industry and just about all people. But I think in some ways our department, the prosecutor's office, maybe was hit harder than anybody, because they've had to continue to operate a system that is overwhelmed and completely reinvent the way that they did it. We probably should have just bought phone implants on their ears, because for the past year, they are on the phone all day, every day, speaking to people. And it's pretty remarkable what they've been able to do. I'll note too that for domestic violence in particular, it's been a scary time. There's been a lot of isolation and a lot of depression, and there's a lot of people in this city that we know personally that we're concerned about, and even more that we don't know that we're concerned about. So I just wanted to take a minute and talk about that building of relationships, and it's so important that we build these relationships. It is so hard to have a victim come in and once again have been assaulted or had some sort of abuse happen, and initially they're on board with the prosecution only to have them change their mind, and there's a lot of reasons why they may do that: financial, intimidation, they just might change their mind. It is so hard for us to just accept it and move on and take the approach that we'll be here when you need us, because we put a lot of work into these cases, and a lot of our hearts go into these cases, and sometimes we just have to let it go because they're not ready for us to prosecute it and willing to participate. So the relationship building is incredible. The relationship building that they have with the police department is incredible. And I just wanted to take a minute and just, there's two people or positions that aren't here tonight that I think you should know about. And the first one is Lana. Lana's been our legal secretary for a very, very long time, and she keeps that office together. She recently broke her leg and is immobile, and so she's had to do a lot of her job sitting at home, totally immobile, and she still keeps us running. She's amazing, and she deserves a lot of credit for that. Hopefully she'll be back pretty soon. She's had to have some surgeries on her broken leg, but she's doing well. And then the other thing that is important thing to know about that VOCA grant is that it requires volunteer hours. We don't get that money from the federal government unless we have volunteers that come in and volunteer. And for a very long time, we couldn't find volunteers. And we actually have a part-time employee that's a college student. You might know her, Olivia, that sits up front in the Treasury, that has donated a lot of hours to volunteer for our department. So I just wanted to give her some kudos too for her hard work and how she's been able to help. And the last thing I'll say is just this, and it probably maybe means a little bit more right now than because there's been a national case where it kind of describes this. But I've told people for a long time that I think it's harder, I think it is more difficult in many ways to be a misdemeanor prosecutor than it is to be a felony prosecutor. Because with the felony, you're dealing with really bad people that have done really bad things. But with the misdemeanors, the wounds and the scars maybe aren't quite so visible, but they have every bit as much impact. And the saying goes as this, and I wholeheartedly believe it, and that is that misdemeanor prosecution is homicide prevention. And what we do is, and what Ashley does, is homicide prevention. And I have no doubt that we're making a positive impact to individuals in our community's lives, and hopefully getting them out of those situations where they might end up in a homicide situation. So, any questions for me?
Thanks, Clint.
Thanks again.
Okay, we'll take a very short break, and then we'll start our meeting.